Bryn TV coverage of the PCI Annual Meeting in Dallas is brought to you by AAIS. It's late October in a tumultuous presidential election year, and no surprise that a discussion with George W. Bush was so well attended here at the 2016 PCI meeting in Dallas. And while the former president did not comment on the two candidates running for office this year, we did ask several attendees about how this election could affect the property casualty industry.
Well, for anyone that doesn't think politics play into the business of insurance, they're wrong. And certainly the presidential election could have an implication on insurers.
So obviously the election is a big theme. What will be happening after the election? Who knows who's going to win it? Still uncertain. I know there's a lot of predictions that it's already over, but obviously we'll have to wait and see. And what that'll mean for things like tort reform, what that'll mean for things like reform of the federal flood program, the NFIP, which is obviously up for renewal next year. I know it's a big concern for companies here.
We're very concerned about what the next election may bring in the terms of regulation of our industry.
You know, the 2016 election is going to be very consequential for the insurance industry, and in particular, a much more Democratic Congress is going to mean that the insurance industry is going to go from playing offense to defense. We're going to have a lot more hostile oversight of the insurance industry.
With regard to property casualty insurers, and frankly all insurers, I think what we're going to see now is a discussion about how much corporate governance is needed, and also if we've gone too far in that regard.
A more Democratic Congress will also be less restraint on the administration. There's been a number of areas where we've seen federal overreach that Congress has really borne down on and pushed back on the administration. And so we're going to see perhaps less of that than we've seen before as they focus a little more on concerns about the industry.
From a health insurance perspective, it's clear that Obamacare, whether Donald Trump wins or Hillary Clinton wins, that Obamacare will be back on the table in some form or fashion, either in some cases potentially repealing or in other cases refining what is now in place for Obamacare.
And clearly we want to make sure that TRIA, which is very important, terrorist risks are not going away. In fact, I believe they're going to become even larger and more of an issue in North America, and we've got to make sure that very worthwhile program stays in place and is there for the people that need it.
It also means that the Supreme Court is going to shift from having previously been 5-4 conservative liberal majority to probably the reverse 4-5 liberal majority. That also reduces pressure on the administration because the courts have been overturning several instances of administrative overreach.
Front and central to what we do is religious freedom. So whoever's in office, we're going to be keenly interested in, are they going to protect the religious freedom of our churches?
In addition, I think there's going to be a discussion about what the right role is, not only for the states in the business of regulation, but for the United States in the business of regulation. The world is becoming a much smaller place, and the international community is playing a much bigger role in the business of the regulation of insurance, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, because there is not a consistent view on a path forward.
So we see an administration, particularly as a consequence of a somewhat dysfunctional Congress, that's been expanding its regulatory reach and turf more and more. We think will be even more emboldened over the next several years. Now that may change because in 2018 there's a huge number of vulnerable Democrats who are up for election, could easily shift back to Republican control at that time and the pendulum could swing back. But we think at least in the next 2 years we're in for a pretty bumpy ride as an industry, particularly with the regulatory overreach concerns.
We're going to wait and see, and we're going to work through good organizations like PCI and actively lobby for the legislation and the reforms that we feel we need to run our business.
For more of our coverage of the 2016 annual meeting, visit the RIN TV On Demand Library.